I am back from New York, back at home, and I will get into some of the stuff that went down in NYC in other recordings, but for this time I thought I would go back to the topic of residencies. I just came from MacDowell. It's been a couple months now, but from my vlogging it seems like it was just a couple weeks ago. And yeah, I thought I would just share some reflections and some further thoughts about artist residencies in general, taking some of what I've learned from MacDowell, Willapa Bay, Jurassic, and Kimmel Harding Nelson, the 4 residencies that I've been fortunate enough to be a part of. And a few years back, I did record a vlog. It's actually my most popular vlog about artist residencies, things to consider. So I thought this could be somewhat of a follow-up. I'll link that video somewhere, hopefully, that you can find it if you're curious. But this video will be artists' residencies, more things to consider. And some of this will just be like riffing on stuff that I had said before, but now I have some more information, some more context. And the things I'm going to focus on in this video are going to be things that may kind of affect your time that you're wanting to spend on your work, just things that you should think through or would be beneficial for you to think through. I don't think any of these are a make or break it type of situation. Like if you didn't think these things through, then you're gonna have a terrible time. It's not that, but I just think it might be helpful for you to think about some of these things. The first thing I wanted to talk about was emotional energy, which is kind of related to the community topic in the first video I did about residencies. It's related to social dynamics, but basically when you arrive at an artist residency, depending on how busy you were beforehand, you may find yourself with just a lot of time to finally process and think through emotions, feelings, memories that have come up. And then add on top of that, you're probably going to have to meet a whole bunch of strangers, which has its own emotional dynamics. Now, I know there are some people who just love meeting people and it doesn't really affect them too much, but I feel like a majority of people, even if they enjoy meeting people, it's a lot to process, especially new people, and navigating how you talk, how you introduce yourself. Am I saying the same thing? Am I sounding boring? Am I sounding interesting? Throw in the mix that you might be in the same room with people who are further along in their careers than you, people who are more renowned than you. And already right there, that's a lot to deal with emotionally. And then there are some residencies where you arrive as a cohort, but there are other residencies like MacDowell where you may arrive on a Monday, somebody else arrives on a Tuesday, somebody else is leaving on a Wednesday. So not only are you meeting a whole bunch of new people, you don't quite know when they're going to leave, or you may know somebody that you connect with for like 3 days really well and then they have to go, or you're at the tail end of your residency and now you have to be the welcoming one, the one who's really trying to be kind and open to the people who have just arrived. And having spoken to a couple of people who are also at MacDowell, that dynamic can be really weird in so much as processing how you're feeling about everything, because especially when you first arrive, you're nervous about arriving and it feels like there's already this group of people that know each other, and then you kind of make your way into the group because you're there, and then as you're preparing mentally and emotionally to leave, all these new people are showing up. It's a lot to deal with. So that's just something to think about. Think about the format, the social format of the residency that you're applying to. And I don't think it's, if you aren't that kind of person, you shouldn't apply. It's more something to just be ready for when you do apply and when you do get accepted to one of these residencies. This can also apply to the number of people that are going to be there. You may be in a cohort of 6 people, or like MacDowell, there may be 20 other people there. And there are pluses and minuses to both. A smaller cohort means more intimate conversations, but it also means you might have a harder time getting away from a person that may clash with you. And then with a bigger cohort, you definitely have more people to interact with, but it can also be overwhelming and maybe repetitive, having to do the what do you do, where are you from, what are you working on while you're here conversations over and over and over again. So just keep that in mind as you're weighing what you're looking for in a residency, that there will be some things that will take emotional energy and require that of you, and plan in advance, prepare accordingly for how you want to spend that emotional energy. The next thing that can come up are, I guess I'll call, small, unexpected, practical things. And these are things that basically you won't exactly know until you're there. It can be as straightforward as the weather and that you're not getting the weather you expected once you arrive. It can be that the bathroom light isn't working and you have to request for the light to be replaced. Or it can be any number of minor things. And I think a lot of minor things piling up can be a lot. I have heard a story of somebody who went to a residency and was a city person, and then once they got to this residency, realized how isolating and in the forest it was, and they left the residency early because they realized it just wasn't for them and they didn't really like being there. I guess another way to put it is thinking in advance how adaptable you want to be. Because when people talk about these artist residencies, we kind of talk about them with this sort of aura of magic. They're just these beautiful places. But when you actually talk to people, there are always weird idiosyncrasies that at best are simple annoyances, but at worst can really affect you feeling comfortable or you feeling grounded while you're there. So yes, residencies are beautiful, amazing, and there's always going to be these little practical things that may come up that I would say just be ready for. Finally, and on a similar note, residencies often are in really lovely locations. So it might be meaningful or helpful to plan in advance how much you'd actually like to take in those surroundings. For a residency like Jurassic, there's a lot of beautiful hiking and sculptures along the trails. For Willapa Bay, there was the beach, there was the bay, there were a lot of state parks that you could visit. And for MacDowell, there was a pond that people were swimming in. There are also trails there, and there's also a little town that you can walk into. And of course, if you're a more go with the flow type person, I'm not saying you need to plan in advance every step of the way, but it might be nice to say to yourself whether you want to go and see these things. For example, at MacDowell, in my first 3 weeks, I was really busy focusing on what I needed to get done because I had deadlines. But I kept hearing about a group of people going to the pond. We're going to the pond and we're swimming, and it sounded really lovely. And I think by the time I hit the 3rd week, I told myself, okay, I will try to make it to the pond at least once. I don't know when I'll be back in New Hampshire again, so I wanted to see this pond. And thankfully I was able to go twice. It definitely wasn't as many times as other people, but I certainly enjoyed the time that I was able to go and swim in the pond. And I felt like I had to figure out how much time I should give myself to hike into town, to visit with other people, to go to the pond, and how much time I should spend on actually getting done what I needed to get done. So I would say just do a quick little glance at what the surrounding area has to offer and what might be of interest to you, so that you don't end up at the end of your residency totally regretting the fact that you didn't go do anything. So those are just some more things that I would say to consider as you are applying to artist residencies. Again, I made a previous video about this that people have found helpful, so there will be a link somewhere. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments and I will do my best to answer them. I'm not an expert by any means, but I have my experience that I can share from. And other than that, in future videos, I will finally be getting to talking about my time in NYC and with Honey and Leon. So until then, take care.